Police slaps a black woman outside court. Just few minutes later, he saw her sat on the bench as judge. The slap echoed across the courthouse steps like a gavel strike. Sharp, final, meant to remind her of her place. But Renee Hale had already taken her seat. The crack of his palm against her cheek was loud enough to silence the courthouse steps. Renee Hale didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply looked Officer Callum Drexler in the eye and said, "See you inside." He had no idea she meant from the bench. They say justice is blind. But when Officer Callum Drexler's hand struck Renee Hale's face outside the courthouse, she saw everything. His rage, his fear, his assumption that she was powerless. He would learn otherwise. She tasted blood on her lip, felt the sting bloom across her cheekbone. The officer sneered and turned away. "Hi there. Thank you for stopping by to listen to this wonderful story today. While you relax and ready to enjoy the story, please hit that subscribe button. Thumbs up and make sure you share this story to your loved ones. And please do not forget to tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Now let's get started." 6 hours earlier, Renee Hale woke at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before her alarm. She always did. The bedroom of her small colonial on Ashford Street was still dark, the kind of Pennsylvania November dark that felt like velvet pressed against the windows. She lay there for a moment, listening to the furnace tick and hum, her breath steady, her hands folded across her stomach like she was already in repose. Today was the day. She rose without hesitation, her feet finding the cold hardwood, and padded to the bathroom. In the mirror, she studied her face with the clinical precision of a woman who had long ago stopped seeking beauty and started seeking proof. Proof that she was still here, still standing, still fighting. 43 years old. Silver threading through her natural hair, which she'd twisted into flat twists the night before. Deep brown skin that had survived Pennsylvania winters and courtroom fluorescence. Eyes that had seen too much but refused to look away. On the counter sat a photograph in a small brass frame. Sienna. 7 years old, gap-toothed, laughing in a park somewhere. Renee picked it up, ran her thumb along the edge. "I made it, baby," she whispered. "Mama made it." She set the photo down gently, like it might shatter. The robe hung on the back of her closet door, black, freshly pressed, smelling faintly of starch and something else. Hope, maybe. Or responsibility. She didn't touch it yet. That would come later, in chambers, in front of witnesses and cameras and all the people who had spent years doubting a black woman could sit on the bench in Hadley Falls. But she would. By 6:15 a.m., she was dressed in a charcoal suit, simple jewelry, low heels. She made oatmeal she didn't eat and coffee she drank too fast. The house was silent except for the scrape of her spoon against the bowl, the gulp of her swallow. No one to share this day with. No one to say, "I'm proud of you." She locked the door behind her and drove through streets still slick with frost. Across town. Officer Callum Drexler's alarm didn't go off because he'd never set it. He woke at 6:32 a.m. in a rented duplex that smelled like old coffee and something sour he couldn't locate. His ex-wife used to handle things like trash schedules and air fresheners. Now he handled shifts, overtime, and the slow decomposition of his patients. He was 51. 26 years on the force. 3 commendations. 2 brutality complaints, both dismissed. 1 divorce. And a gnawing belief that the world had gone soft. He showered fast, shaved rough, and pulled on his uniform like armor. The badge still felt good. Solid. Real. It meant something, even if the department didn't appreciate him anymore. Even if the new chief was all about community policing and de-escalation and other buzzwords that made Callum's jaw clench. He'd grown up in Hadley Falls when it was a steel town, when men worked hard and didn't complain, when respect was a given, not something you had to beg for. Now, the town was half empty. The mill was gone. And people looked at cops like they were the enemy. He poured burnt coffee into a travel mug and checked his phone. A group text from a few of the older guys on the force. Big day at the courthouse. New judge getting sworn in. Bet she doesn't last 6 months. Someone had replied with a laugh cry emoji. Callum didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew what they meant. He'd seen her name in the paper. Renee Hale. Some former public defender turned judge. Probably got the seat because of quotas, politics, the usual nonsense. He didn't have anything personal against her. He didn't know her. But he knew the type. Bleeding hearts who wanted to coddle criminals and act like the system was broken. The system wasn't broken. People were. He drained his coffee, grabbed his keys, and headed out into the cold. 8:43 a.m. Hadley Falls Courthouse. Renee parked in the lot reserved for judicial staff. Her hands were steady on the wheel, but her heart was a drumbeat in her chest. You belong here. She'd told herself that 1,000 times. In law school when she was the only black woman in her class. In the public defender's office when prosecutors tried to steamroll her clients. In the endless nights after Sienna died, when the law felt like a cruel joke and she'd almost walked away from all of it. But she hadn't. She'd clawed her way here, case by case, year by year. And today, she would take the bench. She grabbed her briefcase and stepped out into the November wind. The courthouse loomed ahead. Old granite, steep steps, columns like sentries. It looked like every courthouse in every small American town. Imposing, eternal, indifferent. She climbed the steps slowly, her heels clicking. At the top, a small crowd had already gathered. Press. Supporters. A few attorneys she recognized. Thea Morrissey, her soon-to-be clerk, waved from near the door. Renee allowed herself a small smile. 8:51 a.m. Front steps. Callum Drexler pulled his cruiser into the courthouse lot and killed the engine. He wasn't here for the ceremony. He was here for an arraignment hearing. Some repeat offender who'd been picked up on a warrant. Simple. Routine. He got out, adjusted his belt, and walked toward the steps. That's when he saw the crowd. Camera crews. People in suits. A podium being set up. He rolled his eyes. Of course. The dog and pony show. He pushed through the edge of the crowd, his shoulders wide, his expression hard. A few people glanced at him. Most moved aside. Renee was near the top of the steps now, talking quietly with Thea. Callum didn't see her face. He only saw another body in his way. "Excuse me," he said flatly, moving past. His shoulder brushed hers. Not hard, but not gentle. Renee turned slightly. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He didn't recognize her. She recognized the look. And then he was past, disappearing into the courthouse. Renee exhaled slowly. Thea touched her arm. "You okay?" "Fine," Renee said quietly. "Let's get inside." But her hands, hidden in her coat pockets, were trembling. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 23 minutes. Renee stood just outside the main entrance with Thea, reviewing the order of events one last time. Judge Harlan Voss would administer the oath. There would be brief remarks. Photos. Then she would ascend to chambers, don the robe, and take the bench for the first time. Simple. Dignified. Historic. She felt the weight of it settling over her shoulders like hands pressing down. Not crushing, but reminding. You carry more than yourself today. Your mother would have lost her mind with pride, Thea said softly, adjusting the folder in her hands. Renee's smile was small, bittersweet. She would have worn a hat. Something ridiculous with feathers. And sat front row. And cried through the whole thing. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that aches around the edges. A journalist approached, asking for a pre-ceremony quote. Renee obliged with practiced grace, her voice steady, her words carefully chosen. She'd learned long ago how to speak in soundbites, how to armor herself in professionalism. But beneath it, her stomach churned. She excused herself and turned toward the side entrance. She needed a moment. Just one. away from cameras and questions and eyes that expected her to be a symbol instead of a woman. She descended 3 steps, moving toward the narrow walkway that ran along the courthouse's east side. It was quieter here, colder. The wind bit at her face and she welcomed it, let it ground her. She closed her eyes and breathed. You've earned this. You've bled for this. Behind her, a voice cut through the morning air like gravel scraping concrete. Hey! Hey! You can't park there. Renee turned. Officer Callum Drexler was striding toward a young black man standing beside a sedan with its flashers on. The man, maybe mid-20s, dressed in a delivery uniform, held up his hands immediately, palms out in the universal gesture of surrender. I'm just dropping something off, officer. 2 minutes. I've got a delivery for. I don't care what you've got. Callum's voice was sharp, dismissive. You're blocking official vehicle access. Move it. Now. I'm moving. Renee watched, her jaw tightening. She recognized the tone, the edge, the presumption of guilt before a single question had been asked. The young man fumbled with his keys, clearly rattled. He dropped them, bent to pick them up. Callum stepped closer, his shadow falling over the young man's back. You high. You on something. What? No, sir, I just. Turn around. Hands on the vehicle. Officer, I'm just trying to. Renee's feet moved before her mind caught up. Excuse me. Her voice was calm, firm. The kind of voice that had silenced rowdy courtrooms and made witnesses reconsider their lies. Callum's head snapped toward her. His eyes narrowed, scanning her from head to toe, assessing, dismissing. This doesn't concern you, ma'am. That man is complying, Renee said evenly, her hands relaxed at her sides, her posture open but unyielding. He's moving his vehicle. There's no need to escalate. The young man looked between them, frozen like a rabbit caught between predators. Callum's jaw clenched. He took a step toward Renee, his hand resting on his belt near his radio. A power pose. A reminder of authority, of who held the gun and the badge and the right to command. I said, this doesn't concern you. Renee held his gaze without flinching. I'm simply observing that the situation is resolved. He's cooperating. You're interfering with police business. His voice was rising now, drawing attention from the steps above. I don't know who you think you are, but you need to step back before I cite you for obstruction. She didn't move. Something flickered in Callum's eyes. Anger, yes. But beneath it, something older. Something reflexive and ugly and barely leashed. He saw a black woman, talking back, challenging him, in public, in front of witnesses. And the thing inside him that had been coiled tight for years, the resentment, the bitterness, the barely contained rage at a world that no longer respected his authority, snapped its leash. I'm not going to tell you again, officer. Renee's voice was ice over steel. I'm asking you to de-escalate. Callum closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his boots heavy on the pavement. You don't ask me anything. And then his hand came up fast. Too fast for her to turn, too fast for anyone to intervene. The slap cracked across her face like a gavel strike. The world tilted. Renee's head snapped to the side. Her cheek exploded in heat and light. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. The gasps from the courthouse steps, the shouts, the sudden scramble of movement. For a moment, she couldn't hear anything but that ringing. Couldn't feel anything but the sharp sting spreading across her skin like wildfire, the throb already beginning deep in the bone of her jaw. She tasted copper, blood from where her teeth had caught the inside of her lip. The courthouse steps went silent. Somewhere, everywhere, phones were recording. Callum stood there, breathing hard, his hand still raised slightly as if he might strike again. His face was twisted in fury and something else, something like fear, just beginning to creep in at the edges as reality caught up with reflex. Renee straightened slowly. She didn't touch her face, didn't cry out, didn't stumble back or retreat or give him the satisfaction of seeing her pain. She turned her head, met his eyes, and held them. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, but it carried like a pronouncement. "See you inside." Callum blinked. Confusion flickered across his face, disrupting the anger. Inside. Inside what? Behind them, Thea was running down the steps, her heels clattering, her face drained of color. The young delivery driver stood frozen, his mouth open, keys forgotten in his hand. A reporter with a camera was already shouting questions, and another was speaking rapidly into a phone. But Renee didn't wait for any of it. She turned and walked back up the steps, her spine straight as rebar, her heels clicking with the precision of a metronome. Each step deliberate, each breath controlled. She didn't run, didn't hide her face, didn't give him or anyone else the satisfaction. But her hands, hidden at her sides, fingers curled into her palms, were shaking. Bowen Licht had been standing by a window in the attorney conference room, half watching the pre-ceremony setup outside, half reviewing case notes for a plea hearing scheduled that afternoon. He saw the whole thing. The approach, the confrontation, the slap. His coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, brown liquid spreading across tile, but he didn't notice. Jesus Christ! He was moving before thought caught up, shoving through the door and into the hallway. He'd been a public defender for 11 years in Hadley Falls. He knew Callum Drexler, knew his reputation, knew the complaints that had been buried, the excessive force reports that had been resolved internally, the whispered warnings passed between defense attorneys about which cops had short fuses and itchy trigger fingers. But this was in broad daylight, on camera, in front of dozens of witnesses. And the woman. Bowen's heart stopped as recognition hit him like a freight train. Renee Hale, the woman who was about to be sworn in as a circuit court judge in less than 15 minutes. He stood in the hallway, paralyzed, his pulse hammering in his ears. Renee appeared at the top of the interior staircase, moving with the same measured grace she'd shown outside, but he could see it now, the red mark blooming on her cheek like a brand, the slight swell beginning near her jaw, the tightness around her eyes that spoke of pain held at bay through sheer will. Their eyes met. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. But something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, an understanding, a shared knowledge of what it meant to be powerless in the face of authority, and what it cost to stand up anyway. He'd seen her humiliation, and she knew it. She walked past him without a word, heading toward the judge's chambers, and he caught the faintest tremor in her hands before she clasped them together. Bowen stood there, fists clenched at his sides, a fire igniting in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Not since before the divorce, before the disillusionment, before he'd learned to swallow his anger and play the game. He wasn't playing anymore. Renee closed the chamber door behind her and locked it. Only then did she allow herself to lean against the wall, her breath coming fast now, shallow and uneven. Her hand finally rose to touch her cheek. It burned. The skin was hot and tight, already swelling. She could feel her pulse throbbing in the bruise. But the pain wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the familiarity. She'd been here before. Not physically, but emotionally. The night Sienna died, an officer had told her to calm down when she demanded answers at the hospital. Had put a hand on her shoulder and squeezed too hard when she tried to push past him to see her daughter's body. Had looked at her like she was hysterical instead of grieving, like her pain was a problem to be managed rather than a wound to be honored. She'd swallowed it then. Swallowed the rage and the humiliation because fighting back would have meant never getting answers, never seeing Sienna, never saying goodbye. She would not swallow it now. Renee opened her eyes and looked at the robe hanging on the back of the door. Black, freshly pressed, waiting. She had minutes. Just minutes to pull herself together, to walk into that courtroom, and to take an oath she'd worked her entire life to take. And Callum Drexler had no idea what he'd just done. She touched her lip, tasted blood again, and smiled, a small, cold smile that held no warmth but all the promise of a reckoning. "See you inside," she whispered to the empty room. Thea burst through the chamber door without knocking, her face flushed and her hands trembling. "Renee! Oh my God, Renee!" "Lock the door," Renee said quietly. She was standing at the small mirror mounted on the wall, examining her face with the detached precision of a coroner studying evidence. Thea locked it, then rushed to her side. "We need to get you to a hospital. We need to file a report. We need to get ready for the ceremony." Thea froze. "What?" Renee turned from the mirror, her expression calm, controlled. Only the mark on her face, angry red, already darkening at the edges, betrayed what had just happened. "The ceremony is in 12 minutes. Judge Voss is waiting. The press is outside. We're not stopping this. Renee, that man assaulted you. I know what he did. In front of cameras. In front of witnesses. You can't just. I can. And I will." Renee's voice was steel wrapped in silk. She moved to the desk where her notes for the ceremony lay waiting. Her hands were steady now, all trace of trembling gone. "This is what he wants, Thea. He wants me rattled. He wants me to make a scene, to delay, to prove I'm not fit for this bench. I won't give him that." Thea stared at her, recognition dawning. "You know who he is." "I know exactly who he is." Renee picked up her notes, scanned them without really seeing the words. "Officer Callum Drexler. 26 years on the force. 2 excessive force complaints, both dismissed. He was one of the responding officers the night Sienna died." The air went out of the room. Thea's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Renee. He doesn't remember me. Why would he?" Renee's voice was quiet, almost philosophical. "I was just another grieving black mother demanding answers he didn't have. Just another problem to manage and move past." She set the notes down. "But I remember him. Then you have to report this. You have to. I will handle it." Renee turned, and her eyes were hard as obsidian. "But not by running. Not by hiding. Not by giving him the power to derail this day." She paused, then softer. "I didn't come this far to let Callum Drexler take this from me." Thea's eyes filled with tears. "What do you need?" "Foundation. The good stuff. And 2 minutes to breathe." Outside the chamber door, the hallway was chaos. Courthouse security was trying to manage the growing crowd. Reporters were shouting questions. The video of the slap was already circulating. Bowen could hear it playing on someone's phone as he pushed through the press of bodies. "You don't ask me anything." Crack. He flinched every time he heard it. The courthouse administrator, a thin man named Gerald Pitts, was standing near the ceremony staging area, phone pressed to his ear, his face pale. Bowen caught fragments of the conversation. "Yes, I understand the optics, but she hasn't made a statement. Don't know if she wants to proceed. Contacted Officer Drexler's supervisor, but..." Bowen's jaw clenched. Of course they'd contacted Drexler's supervisor first. Of course the instinct was to protect the institution, manage the PR, control the narrative. He'd seen it 100 times. 1,000. His phone buzzed. A text from another public defender. "Did you see what happened? Is she okay?" Then another. "Holy shit, Drexler's done." And another. $20 says they bury this." Bowen shoved his phone into his pocket and started toward the administrative offices. He didn't have a plan. Didn't know what he was going to say. He just knew he couldn't stand in that hallway and do nothing. He found Gerald near the courtroom entrance, still on the phone. "We need to postpone," Gerald was saying. "Give her time to. Yes, I understand it's her call, but..." Bowen stepped in front of him. "Where's Drexler?" Gerald blinked, lowered the phone. "I'm sorry. Officer Drexler. Where is he? I don't think that's..." Is he still in the building? Gerald hesitated, and that hesitation told Bowen everything. He's in the building, Bowen said flatly. You didn't arrest him. You didn't even remove him from the premises. Mr. Licht, this is a delicate situation. Delicate. Bowen's voice rose. He assaulted a woman on courthouse steps in front of a dozen witnesses, and you're worried about delicate? We're gathering facts. The facts are on video. Gerald's face hardened. The last thing Judge Hale needs right now is attorneys grandstanding on her behalf. If you want to help, step back and let us handle this. Bowen stared at him, rage and futility warring in his chest. He wanted to argue, wanted to shout, wanted to punch something. But Gerald was already turning away, phone back to his ear. Bowen stood there, fists clenched, feeling the old familiar weight settle over him. The weight of a system that protected itself first and the people it was supposed to serve last. He'd felt it when clients were railroaded by overworked courts and indifferent judges. When plea deals were pushed because trials were expensive and inconvenient. When the innocent pled guilty because fighting meant risking everything. He'd learned to live with that weight. Learned to carry it. But watching Renee Hale's head snap back from the force of that slap had cracked something open inside him, and the weight didn't feel bearable anymore. In the east stairwell, away from cameras and crowds, Callum Drexler stood with his back against the cold concrete wall, trying to steady his breathing. His hand still tingled where it had connected with her face. What the hell did I just do? The question circled his mind like a vulture, but he kept pushing it away, kept reaching for justification. She'd interfered. She'd escalated. She'd challenged his authority in front of witnesses, and he'd reacted. Maybe too hard. Yeah, maybe he shouldn't have done it, but she'd pushed him. They always pushed him. The new chief. The activists. The media. Everyone acting like cops were the problem, like 26 years of service meant nothing, like he was supposed to just take disrespect and smile. His phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor, Lieutenant Ramos. My office. Now. Callum's stomach dropped. Another text, this one from another officer. Dude, what the hell happened? You okay? He didn't respond to either. He should go upstairs. Face Ramos. Explain what happened. She'd interfered with an active situation. She'd refused to comply, His phone buzzed again. This time it was a link. No message. Just a link. He clicked it. The video loaded instantly. Whoever shot it had a steady hand and a clear angle. He watched himself stride toward the woman. Watched her speak. He couldn't hear the words over the wind, but he could see her body language. Calm. Non-threatening. He watched himself step closer. Watched his hand go up. Watched the slap. Her head snapping to the side. The impact. The crowd's reaction. And then her face as she turned back to him. Composed, unflinching, with those two words clear enough to read on her lips even without sound. See you inside. The video had 63,000 views already. The comments were brutal. Fire this thug. Arrest him. How many times has he done this when cameras weren't around? Callum closed the video, his hand shaking. He should feel regret. He knew that. He should feel shame. But what he felt, underneath the fear and the adrenaline crash, was anger. Anger that he was being judged by people who'd never walked a day in his shoes. Anger that one mistake, one moment, could erase decades of service. Anger that the world had changed and left him behind, that the rules he'd learned didn't apply anymore, that respect was dead and authority meant nothing. His phone buzzed again. Ramos. Drexler. Now. He pushed off the wall and started toward the administrative wing, his jaw set, his mind already building his defense. She'd interfered. She'd escalated. He'd reacted. That was all. The chamber door opened. Renee emerged, and for a moment, the hallway went quiet. Thea had done her work well. The foundation covered most of the redness, though the slight swelling was still visible if you knew to look. Renee's hair was perfect. Her suit was immaculate. Her expression was serene. She looked like a woman about to make history, not like a woman who'd been assaulted 20 minutes earlier. Judge Harlan Voss approached, his weathered face creased with concern. "Renee, I heard what happened. We can postpone. No one would blame." "We're not postponing," Renee said gently. "I'm ready." "Are you sure?" She met his eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Voss studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. Let's make you a judge." The crowd began to move toward the courtroom. Press, attorneys, courthouse staff, supporters who'd come to witness history. Bowen hung back, watching from the edge of the hallway as Renee walked past. She didn't look at him. But just before she entered the courtroom, she paused, turned her head slightly. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, he saw past the armor, saw the woman beneath the judge, saw the pain she was carrying and the strength it took to carry it with grace. She gave him the smallest nod, acknowledgement, perhaps, or gratitude for bearing witness. Then she was gone, swept into the courtroom on a tide of ceremony and history. Bowen stood in the empty hallway, his heart pounding, a decision crystallizing in his mind. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The courtroom was older than most of the people in it. High ceilings with crown molding that had gone yellow with age. Wooden benches worn smooth by decades of anxious waiting. Tall windows that let in cold November light, but no warmth. An American flag in one corner, a Pennsylvania state flag in the other, both hanging limp. And at the front, elevated above it all, the bench. Renee stood before it, her right hand raised, Judge Harlan Voss beside her holding a worn Bible that had sworn in every judge in Hadley Falls for the past 60 years. The courtroom was packed. Every seat filled. People standing along the back wall. Cameras positioned at respectful distances. Voss's voice was steady, formal, carrying the weight of tradition. "Do you solemnly swear that you will administer justice without respect to persons, and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as judge of the circuit court, according to the best of your abilities and understanding, agreeably to the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this Commonwealth?" Renee's voice didn't waver. "I do." The room erupted in applause. Renee lowered her hand and turned to face the crowd. The applause rolled over her like a wave, warm, affirming, nearly overwhelming. She saw faces she recognized. Attorneys she'd worked with. Clients she'd defended. Community members who'd supported her campaign for the bench. She saw Thea in the front row, tears streaming down her face. She saw reporters scribbling notes, cameras flashing. And in the back, partially obscured by the standing crowd, she saw Bowen Licht. He wasn't applauding. He was just watching her, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. Then Voss was guiding her toward the bench, helping her into the high-backed leather chair that was now hers. The robe settled around her shoulders, heavy, official, real. She sat. The applause continued for another moment, then gradually faded as Voss raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Honorable Renee Hale, Judge of the 8th Circuit Court." More applause, briefer this time. Then Voss leaned down, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "The bench is yours, Your Honor. Make us proud." He stepped back, and suddenly Renee was alone. Elevated, robed, presiding. She took a slow breath, let her hands rest on the bench's smooth surface, and looked out at the courtroom. This was power. Real power. The power to change lives, to demand accountability, to enforce the law without fear or favor. The power that Callum Drexler had assumed she didn't have when he'd raised his hand against her. She allowed herself a small, private smile. Then she picked up the gavel and brought it down once, a sharp, clear sound that echoed through the chamber. "This court is now in session." The ceremony concluded with brief remarks and photographs. Renee endured both with grace, though her cheek throbbed beneath the makeup and every smile sent a spike of pain through her jaw. She shook hands, accepted congratulations, posed for pictures, and through it all, she felt the weight of what was coming. Because Callum Drexler was still in the building. She'd seen the text Thea had shown her. Drexler had been called to his supervisor's office but hadn't been arrested, hadn't been removed from the premises. He was likely being counseled, given a chance to explain, afforded all the courtesy and benefit of the doubt that institutions always gave their own. The same courtesy he denied her on the courthouse steps. Finally, the crowd began to disperse. Renee retreated to chambers, closed the door, and allowed herself 60 seconds of stillness. Her face hurt. Her head ached. Her hands wanted to shake, but she wouldn't let them. A knock at the door. "Come in." Thea entered, her expression grim. "Your Honor," she began, then caught herself, smiled slightly. "Sorry. Still getting used to that." "What is it?" "Your afternoon docket. There are 3 cases scheduled." Thea hesitated. One of them involves Officer Drexler. Renee's pulse kicked up, but her face remained calm. "Explain." "He's a witness in a DUI case. Commonwealth versus Bergen. The defendant is challenging the traffic stop. Drexler was the arresting officer. He's scheduled to testify at 2 o'clock. Renee was silent for a long moment. This was it. The forced proximity. The moment when the system would reveal whether it had any integrity left, or whether it would bend and twist to protect its own. "Who's defending?" she asked. "Bowen Licht." Of course it was. The afternoon session began exactly on time. Renee took the bench, her robe crisp, her expression neutral. The courtroom was far less crowded now, just the usual assembly of attorneys, defendants, court staff, and a handful of people with nothing better to do than watch the machinery of justice grind forward. But the press was still there. Word had spread fast. Every reporter in Hadley Falls wanted to see what would happen when Renee Hale and Callum Drexler occupied the same room again. The bailiff called the first case. A simple arraignment. Renee processed it efficiently, set bail, scheduled the next hearing. 12 minutes, start to finish. The second case took longer, a motion to suppress evidence that required her to actually weigh arguments and make a ruling. She listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and ultimately denied the motion. The prosecutor looked relieved. The defense attorney looked unsurprised. Then the bailiff called the third case. Commonwealth versus Bergen. DUI case, evidentiary hearing on the motion to suppress. Renee's hands were steady on the bench as the parties approached. The prosecutor was a young woman named Danielle Fry, eager and slightly nervous. And the defense attorney was Bowen Licht. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd stood in front of 100 judges, but when his eyes met Renee's, something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Solidarity. Something else she couldn't quite name. "Your Honor," he said with a slight nod. "Counselor," she replied, her voice professional, distant. Then the side door opened and Callum Drexler walked in. The air in the courtroom changed immediately. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Phones came out, not to record, that wasn't allowed in session, but ready. Waiting. Callum's eyes swept the courtroom, then landed on the bench. On Renee. For a moment, his expression was blank. Confused. Then recognition hit. His face went white. Then red. His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscles jump. He stopped walking. The prosecutor turned. "Officer Drexler?" He didn't move. Renee kept her expression absolutely neutral, her voice calm and clear. "Officer Drexler, please approach the witness stand." It wasn't a request. Callum's hands curled into fists at his sides. For a terrible moment, Renee thought he might refuse. Might turn and walk out. Might do something that would force her hand and create the spectacle the press was hoping for. But then his training kicked in, or his survival instinct, and he moved forward stiffly, his boots heavy on the courtroom floor. He passed the defense table. Bowen watched him with the intensity of a hawk tracking prey. Callum climbed into the witness box and stood there, rigid. The bailiff approached with the Bible. "Raise your right hand." Callum raised it. The same hand. Renee could still feel where it had struck her. Could still taste the blood. "Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" Callum's voice was rough. "I do." "State your name for the record." "Officer Callum Drexler, Hadley Falls Police Department." He sat down, and his eyes found Renee's again. She met his gaze without flinching, without sympathy, without fear. "Proceed, counselor," she said to the prosecutor. Danielle Fry stood, her notes trembling slightly in her hands. "Thank you, Your Honor. The Commonwealth calls Officer Drexler to establish the probable cause for the traffic stop in question." She began her direct examination, routine questions about the date, time, location of the stop. Callum answered mechanically, his eyes never leaving Renee. Bowen sat at the defense table, perfectly still, watching everything. Renee listened to the testimony with the careful attention she'd give any witness, making notes, tracking inconsistencies. But beneath the professional exterior, her heart was a drum, her blood was fire, and the irony of the moment was so sharp it could cut. Callum Drexler, who had struck her less than 6 hours ago because he believed she had no power, was now sitting in her courtroom, under oath, subject to her authority. The Commonwealth finished its direct examination. Renee turned to the defense table. "Cross-examination, Mr. Licht?" Bowen stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but it carried. "Yes, Your Honor. I have questions." He picked up his legal pad and approached the witness stand. Callum's jaw was still clenched. His eyes flicked between Bowen and Renee, and she could see the calculation happening. How much did they know? How much would they use? How much danger was he in? Bowen stopped a few feet from the witness stand, close enough to make it personal. "Officer Drexler," he began, his tone conversational, almost friendly. "You testified that you observed my client's vehicle weaving within its lane before you initiated the stop. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And that was the sole basis for your reasonable suspicion?" "Yes." "I see." Bowen consulted his notes, though Renee suspected he didn't need to. "How would you characterize your state of mind that evening?" Danielle Fry stood. "Objection. Relevance." Bowen turned to Renee. "Your Honor, the officer's state of mind is directly relevant to his powers of observation and the reliability of his testimony." Renee considered this for precisely 2 seconds. Overruled. "The witness will answer." Callum shifted in his seat. "My state of mind was professional. Alert." "Were you angry?" Bowen asked. "Objection." Fry was on her feet again. "Your Honor," Bowen said calmly, "I'm establishing bias and credibility." Renee nodded. "I'll allow it. Answer the question, officer." Callum's face darkened. "No, I wasn't angry." "Are you angry now?" Bowen asked. Silence. The courtroom held its breath. Callum stared at Bowen, then slowly turned his gaze to Renee. "No," he said finally. "Are you sure?" Bowen pressed. "Because you seem tense. Your jaw is clenched. Your hands are gripping the armrests of that chair hard enough to leave marks. That seems like anger to me." "Objection." Fry's voice was sharp now. "Counsel is badgering the witness." Bowen didn't wait for the ruling. He turned to Renee, and when he spoke, his voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Your Honor, I'm simply trying to establish whether this officer has a pattern of letting his emotions override his professional judgment. I think that's relevant to this case. And to others." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Renee kept her face perfectly neutral, but something passed between her and Bowen in that moment. an understanding, an alliance. "Sustained," she said quietly. "Move on, Mr. Licht." Bowen nodded, turned back to Callum. And for the next 20 minutes, he methodically dismantled the traffic stop, exposing inconsistencies in Callum's testimony, highlighting procedural failures, painting a picture of an officer who cut corners and expected no one to call him on it. Callum's answers grew shorter, sharper. His anger was barely contained now, and Renee presided over it all with perfect judicial composure, her rulings fair and measured, giving Callum no grounds for appeal and no excuse to claim bias. When Bowen finally finished and returned to his seat, Callum looked like a man who'd been stripped down to bone. "Redirect," Renee asked the prosecutor. Danielle Fry stood, but she looked defeated. "No, Your Honor. The witness is excused." Callum stood on shaking legs and stepped down from the witness box. As he passed the bench, he glanced up at Renee one last time. She looked back at him with the full weight of her authority and her dignity. "See you inside," her eyes said. "I told you so." Then he was gone, disappearing through the side door like a ghost. The courtroom exhaled collectively. Renee brought down her gavel. "This court will take a 15-minute recess before closing arguments." Renee stood in her chambers during the recess, her hands braced against the desk, her head bowed. The adrenaline that had carried her through Callum's testimony was draining away now, leaving behind exhaustion and a tremor she couldn't quite control. She'd done it. She'd sat on that bench and presided with fairness and dignity while the man who'd assaulted her squirmed under oath. She hadn't flinched, hadn't broken, hadn't given anyone reason to question her fitness for the bench. But God, it had cost her. Her cheek throbbed. Her hands ached from gripping the gavel so tightly. And beneath it all was the old wound, ripped open fresh, the memory of Sienna, and the night Callum Drexler had first entered her life. A soft knock at the door. "Come in," she said, straightening quickly, rebuilding the armor. The door opened. Not Thea. Bowen Licht. He stood in the doorway, his jacket off, his tie loosened, looking like a man who'd just gone 12 rounds and wasn't sure if he'd won or lost. "Your Honor," he began, then stopped. "I'm sorry. I should have asked Thea if this was a good time." "I can." "It's fine, Mr. Licht." Renee gestured toward the chair across from her desk. "Close the door." He did, then sat down slowly, his eyes searching her face. "That was..." He started, then shook his head. "I don't even know what to call that." "A hearing," Renee said simply. "A reckoning," Bowen corrected quietly. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with things unsaid. Bowen leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I want you to know, what I did in there wasn't about grandstanding or making a name for myself. I know it might have looked." "You did your job," Renee interrupted gently. "You defended your client. You exposed weaknesses in the Commonwealth's case. That's what you're supposed to do." "That's not all I did." His voice was low, intense. "I went after Drexler because of what he did to you. Because someone needed to. Because..." He stopped, struggling for words. "Because I've spent 11 years watching cops like him skate by on the thinnest ice and no one ever calls them on it. And when I saw him hit you this morning, something inside me just broke." Renee studied him carefully. This wasn't professional courtesy. This was personal. "Why?" she asked softly. Bowen looked down at his hands. "My younger sister, Maya. She was 19. Got pulled over for a broken taillight about 8 years ago." His voice was steady but hollow, reciting facts he'd repeated too many times. "The officer said she was being uncooperative. Said she reached for something. He panicked. Shot her twice in the chest." Renee's breath caught. "She was reaching for her registration," Bowen continued. "It was in the glove box, right where you're supposed to keep it. But he said he feared for his life. Internal Affairs cleared him. District Attorney declined to prosecute. He's still on the force in Philadelphia." still pulling people over. "Bowen," Renee whispered. "I'm so sorry." He looked up, and his eyes were wet, but he didn't let the tears fall. "So when I saw Drexler slap you this morning, I saw him. The cop who killed my sister. And every cop who's ever thought the badge made them untouchable." He paused. "I saw you stand back up. Saw you walk into that courthouse with your head high. And I thought, if she can do that, maybe the system isn't completely broken. Maybe there's still someone willing to fight." Renee felt something crack open inside her chest. She'd spent so long armoring herself, keeping everyone at a distance, trusting no one. But this man, this stranger who'd witnessed her humiliation and turned it into solidarity, was offering her something she hadn't had in years. An ally. Maybe even a friend. "Drexler was there the night my daughter died," she heard herself say. Bowen went very still. Renee stood and walked to the window, her back to him, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Sienna was 7. It was 3 years ago. Her voice was distant, clinical, the only way she could tell this story without shattering. "There was a shooting 2 blocks from our house. Gang-related," they said. Stray bullet came through the living room window while Sienna was watching cartoons. She heard Bowen's sharp intake of breath but didn't turn around. "I heard the glass break. Heard her scream. By the time I got to her." Renee's voice faltered for just a moment. "There was so much blood. I called 911. Did everything right. But she died before the ambulance arrived." "Renee," Bowen's voice was thick with grief. "The police came. Drexler was one of them. I was covered in her blood, screaming for answers. Who shot her? Why? What were they going to do about it?" Renee's hands were fists now, pressed against the window frame. "He told me to calm down. Said they'd investigate. Said I needed to step back and let them do their job." "Did they?" Bowen asked quietly. "Investigate." Renee's laugh was bitter. "They ruled it gang violence. Unsolved. Case went cold within 6 months. No arrests. No justice. Just another dead black child in a file cabinet somewhere." She turned to face him now, and the naked pain in her expression made Bowen's chest ache. "That's why I became a judge," she said simply. "Because the system failed my daughter. Because cops like Drexler get to decide who matters and who doesn't. Because someone needed to sit on that bench and demand better." Bowen stood slowly, closing the distance between them but stopping just short of touching her. "You honored her today," he said quietly. "Sienna. You honored her by not letting Drexler break you. By taking that bench and showing everyone what real strength looks like." Renee's eyes filled with tears for the first time that day. "It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like survival. Maybe they're the same thing." They stood there, 2 feet apart, 2 people bound by grief and fury and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the system could still be forced to do what was right. "He didn't recognize me," Renee said softly. "This morning, when he slapped me, he had no idea who I was. Just another black woman who needed to be put in her place." "He knows now," Bowen said, and there was something fierce in his voice. "And so does everyone else. You're not invisible anymore, Renee. You're a judge. You have power. And I promise you," he paused, and when he spoke again it was a vow, "I will do everything in my power to make sure Drexler answers for what he did. To you. And to everyone else he's hurt." Renee searched his face. "Why? You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not." Bowen's voice was rough with emotion. "But I owed my sister justice and I never got it for her. Maybe I can get it for you. Maybe that counts for something." A knock at the door broke the moment. "Your Honor." Thea's voice. 5 minutes until we're back in session." "Thank you," Renee called out, her voice steady again. She turned back to Bowen, wiped her eyes quickly, and rebuilt her composure with visible effort. "I should rule on your motion," she said, back to professional. Bowen nodded, understanding the shift. Your Honor. But as he turned to leave, she spoke again. Bowen. He stopped, looked back. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me. Not the judge. Not the victim. Just me. His smile was small but genuine. That's the only person I've seen all day. Then he was gone, and Renee was alone with her ghosts and her grief and the strange, unexpected warmth of knowing that for the first time in 3 years, someone understood. The ruling came down exactly as it should have. Renee granted Bowen's motion to suppress. The traffic stop was tainted by procedural failures, and Callum Drexler's testimony was riddled with inconsistencies. Without the stop, the Commonwealth had no case. The defendant, a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd made a mistake, walked out of the courtroom with tears in his eyes and a second chance. The prosecutor accepted the ruling with frustrated grace. And Bowen packed his briefcase with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd won more than just a case. When the courtroom finally emptied and Renee returned to chambers, the exhaustion hit her like a wave. She shed the robe and hung it carefully, then sank into her chair and let herself just breathe. It was after 5. The courthouse was quieting down. Through the window, she could see the November sky going purple and gold, the streetlights beginning to flicker on. She should go home. Should eat something. Should ice her face and try to process everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. But the thought of walking into her empty house, of sitting alone with her thoughts and her ghosts, felt unbearable. A knock. It's open, she called, too tired to pretend otherwise. Bowen leaned in, still in his shirt and tie, his jacket slung over one arm. I know you've had the longest day in human history, so feel free to tell me to go away. But he held up a paper bag. I come bearing peace offerings. Despite everything, Renee felt a smile tug at her lips. What kind of peace offerings? The Greek place on 4th Street. I got spanakopita, dolmas, and baklava because I didn't know what you liked and figured variety was safer than assumptions. He paused. Also coffee. Real coffee, not the courthouse sludge. Renee hesitated. Every instinct told her to say no, to maintain professional distance, to not let anyone get close. But God, she was tired of being alone. Come in, she said, and close the door before someone sees you bribing a judge. Bowen grinned and entered, setting the bag on her desk. I prefer to think of it as facilitating inter-bar relations. Is that what we're calling it? Would you prefer feeding someone who definitely didn't eat lunch and probably didn't eat breakfast either? Renee's silence was answer enough. Bowen unpacked the containers with easy efficiency, producing plastic forks and napkins like a magician pulling rabbits from a hat. I've been doing this job long enough to recognize the signs. Public defenders and judges. We're the same species. We survive on caffeine and spite, and occasionally forget that food is a biological necessity. Spite. Renee raised an eyebrow as she accepted a container of spanakopita. Absolutely. Bowen settled into the chair across from her desk. Spite is a vastly underrated motivator. They said I couldn't do it, so I did it anyway, has powered more social change than we give it credit for. Renee took a bite, and the flavors exploded on her tongue. Spinach and feta and phyllo dough, warm and savory, and exactly what she didn't know she needed. This is incredible. Right. Costa doesn't advertise much, but he's a genius. Bowen ate his own food with the unconscious efficiency of someone used to eating at his desk. I discovered it during my divorce. When you're living on your own for the first time in 15 years and realize you never actually learned to cook, you find the good takeout fast. 15 years, Renee said softly. That's a long time. High school sweethearts. Everyone said we were too young. We were determined to prove them wrong. He smiled, but it was sad around the edges. Turns out they weren't wrong. Just early. We grew up. We grew apart. No villains. No drama. Just two people who woke up one day and realized they didn't know each other anymore. Do you miss it? Renee asked. Being married? Bowen considered this while chewing thoughtfully. I miss having someone to talk to at the end of the day. I miss the shorthand that comes with years of history, the inside jokes, the shared references. But do I miss her specifically? He shook his head. Not anymore. I think I miss the idea of partnership more than the reality of what we had. Renee nodded slowly. I understand that. After Sienna died, people kept telling me I was young, that I could have more children. Like she was replaceable. Like grief was just a gap that could be filled with something similar. That's horrible. They meant well. Renee picked at her food. But they didn't understand. I don't miss having a child. I miss her. Her specific laugh. The way she said, "Mama," when she wanted something. The gap in her teeth. Her voice softened. The way she believed I could fix anything. Bowen was quiet for a moment. My sister used to call me every Sunday night. Like clockwork. She'd tell me about her week, her classes, her friends, whatever drama was happening in her life. After she died, I'd still reach for my phone Sunday nights. Took me almost a year to stop expecting it to ring. Does it get easier? Renee asked. Everyone says it does, but I don't know if I believe them. It gets different, Bowen said carefully. The sharp edges smooth out. The pain becomes something you carry instead of something that's carrying you. But easier. He shrugged. I don't think that's the right word. You just get stronger at bearing it. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the easy quiet of two people who didn't need to fill every gap with words. Finally, Bowen spoke again, his tone lighter. Can I ask you something that's absolutely none of my business? Renee's lips quirked. You can ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Fair. He leaned back in his chair. What was the first thing you thought when you saw Drexler walk into that courtroom this afternoon? Renee surprised herself by laughing. A real laugh, rough from disuse but genuine. You want the honest answer? Always. I thought, God is real and she has a sense of humor. Bowen nearly choked on his coffee. Your Honor, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Don't Your Honor me when we're eating Greek food in my chambers after hours. What should I call you then? Renee met his eyes. Renee is fine. Renee, he repeated, and the way he said it, careful, respectful, but warm, made something flutter in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. Tell me something, she said, needing to shift the moment before it became too much. Why public defense? You're good enough to make real money in private practice. Why stay in the trenches? Bowen set down his fork and considered. Because someone has to give a damn. Because most of my clients never had a chance. Born into poverty, failed by schools, criminalized for trying to survive. The system chews them up and spits them out and calls it justice. He paused. And because after Maya died, I realized that every client I defend might be someone's sister, someone's daughter, someone who matters to somebody, even if they don't matter to the system. That's why I wanted this bench, Renee said quietly. I got tired of watching judges who didn't see my clients as human, who made decisions from positions of privilege and called it impartiality. And now you get to be different. Now I get to try. She smiled slightly. One case at a time. One defendant at a time. It won't fix the system. But maybe it'll make it bend a little. That's all any of us can do, Bowen said. Bend it until it breaks. Or becomes something better. They finished eating, and Bowen produced the baklava with a flourish. Dessert. Because you survived the day from hell and that deserves celebration. Renee took a piece, the honey and nuts and delicate pastry melting on her tongue. When's the last time you celebrated something? Bowen thought about it. Honestly, I don't remember. You. The day I got the appointment to the bench. Thea brought champagne to my house. We drank 1 glass each and I cried for 20 minutes. Renee paused. Happy tears. Sad tears. Scared tears. All of them at once. That still counts as celebration. Does it? Absolutely. Any occasion that involves champagne and authentic emotion qualifies. They smiled at each other, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Bowen cleared his throat gently. I should go. Let you rest. Probably wise, Renee agreed, though she found herself reluctant to see him leave. He stood, gathering the empty containers. For what it's worth, you were extraordinary today. On the bench. Under pressure. All of it. So were you, Renee said softly. In that courtroom. The way you cross-examined Drexler. You gave him nowhere to hide. Good. Something hard flashed in Bowen's eyes. He shouldn't get to hide. Not anymore. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. Renee. Yes. If you ever need someone to talk to, not as a judge, not as a professional, just as someone who understands, he met her eyes. I'm here. No agenda. No expectations. Just here. Renee felt the words settle around her heart like a blanket. Thank you, Bowen. That means more than you know. He nodded, smiled that sad, genuine smile, and slipped out. Renee sat alone in her chambers, surrounded by the smell of Greek food and good coffee and the lingering warmth of unexpected connection. For the first time in 3 years, the loneliness felt less like a prison sentence and more like a choice she could unmake. If she was brave enough. Have you ever found an unexpected friend in the middle of your darkest moment? Someone who just got it? Tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. The complaint arrived 3 days later. Renee was in chambers, reviewing briefs for the following week's docket, when Thea knocked and entered with an expression that made Renee's stomach drop. What is it? Thea closed the door and handed her an envelope. Official seal. Judicial Conduct Board. Renee's hands were steady as she opened it, but her heart was already racing. Formal complaint of judicial bias and misconduct. Complainant. Officer Callum Drexler. She read it once. Then again. The words blurring and sharpening in turns. Drexler alleged that Judge Renee Hale had demonstrated clear bias against him during the Commonwealth v. Bergen hearing. That she had shown favoritism toward defense counsel Bowen Licht. That she had allowed improper questioning designed to harass and intimidate a law enforcement officer. That her rulings were motivated by personal animus stemming from an alleged incident outside the courthouse. Alleged. He was calling it alleged. As if there weren't videos. As if there weren't witnesses. As if the bruise on her face that had taken a week to fade had been her imagination. But the most damaging part came at the end. It has come to my attention that Judge Hale has a personal relationship with defense attorney Bowen Licht, which was not disclosed to the court. On the evening of November 14th, Mr. Licht was observed entering Judge Hale's private chambers and remaining there for approximately 90 minutes after courthouse hours. This relationship raises serious questions about impropriety and judicial ethics. Renee's blood went cold. November 14th. The day of her swearing-in. The day Bowen had brought food and coffee and they'd talked like two human beings instead of legal professionals. Someone had been watching, documenting, building a case. This is insane, Thea said, her voice shaking with anger. He assaulted you. On camera. And now he's filing ethics complaints. It's strategy, Renee said quietly, her lawyer brain engaging even as her heart cracked. He knows the assault allegations will move slowly through the system. This is faster. This gets me off the bench while they investigate. This neutralizes me. They can't possibly take this seriously. They have to take it seriously. Renee set the letter down carefully, like it might explode. Any complaint against a sitting judge has to be investigated. And if they find even the appearance of impropriety. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Thea sank into a chair. What about Bowen? Do you think he knew someone was watching? I don't know, Renee said, but doubt was already creeping in like poison. The call from the Judicial Conduct Board came that afternoon. A polite woman named Patricia Hollis explained that the complaint required a preliminary investigation. That Renee would need to provide a written response within 10 days. That she was strongly advised to recuse herself from any cases involving Officer Drexler or the Hadley Falls Police Department pending the outcome. And Mr. Licht? Renee asked, her voice carefully neutral. Will he be questioned? We'll be interviewing all relevant parties, Patricia said, including Mr. Licht. He's already agreed to provide a statement. The floor dropped out from under Renee's world. He's already agreed? Yes. He contacted us this morning. Said he wanted to be cooperative and transparent. Renee ended the call and sat in silence, her mind racing. Bowen had contacted them. Before she even knew about the complaint, he'd reached out to the conduct board. Why? To protect himself? To get ahead of the narrative? To distance himself from her before the scandal spread? Or, the thought made her feel sick. Had this been his plan all along? Get close to her, document everything, use her story for some greater purpose she'd been too lonely and too trusting to see? Her phone buzzed. A text from Bowen. Can we talk? It's important. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then she turned her phone face down on the desk and didn't respond. Bowen tried 3 more times that day. A text. Renee, please. I can explain. A call that went to voicemail. I know you probably saw the complaint. I need you to know I didn't. Just let me explain what happened. Another text. I'm not the enemy here. Please. Renee ignored them all. She left the courthouse through a side entrance to avoid reporters who'd already gotten wind of the complaint. Drove home in silence. Walked into her empty house and stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing. Her phone rang again. Bowen. This time, she answered. What? Her voice was flat, hard. Thank God. Bowen sounded relieved and stressed in equal measure. Renee, listen. Why did you contact the conduct board? Silence. Bowen. Why did you contact them before I even knew there was a complaint? Because I wanted to get ahead of it, he said carefully. I knew Drexler would twist what happened. I wanted to give them the truth first. The truth about what? About how you brought food to my chambers. About how we talked about our dead family members. Her voice was rising now, sharp with betrayal. About how I trusted you. Renee, it wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She was pacing now, the phone pressed hard against her ear. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you got close to me, documented our interactions, and then ran to the ethics board the second things got complicated. That's not what happened. Bowen's voice was strained. I contacted them because I knew this was coming. I've been documenting Drexler's pattern of behavior for months. Renee stopped pacing. You've been what? Documenting. Building a case. He's had complaints before. You know that. But they always get buried. I've been collecting evidence, talking to other victims, trying to build something the department can't ignore. He paused. That's why I was so ready in that courtroom. I already knew his patterns. I already had the questions prepared. And you didn't think to tell me this? I was going to. When, Bowen? When were you going to tell me you were using my assault as part of your crusade? I wasn't using you. His voice cracked. What happened to you was the final straw. It was the proof I needed that Drexler was out of control. But I wasn't using you, Renee. I was trying to protect you. To make sure he couldn't bury this like he's buried everything else. By going to the ethics board behind my back? by being honest with them before Drexler could poison the well. Bowen was almost shouting now. He's going to paint me as biased. You as corrupt. Us as conspirators. I wanted to get the truth on record first. That we talked, yes, but there was nothing improper. That I witnessed your assault and it affected me, yes, but that doesn't make my professional work invalid. Renee's laugh was bitter. Don't you see? It doesn't matter what the truth is. The appearance is enough. You in my chambers after hours. Us sharing personal stories. It looks exactly like what he's accusing us of. So what? Bowen's voice turned hard. We're supposed to pretend we're not human? That we can't have conversations or connections because we work in the same building? That's bullshit, Renee, and you know it. No, what I know is that I've been a judge for less than 2 weeks and I'm already facing an ethics investigation because I made the mistake of trusting someone. The words came out sharper than she intended, cutting deep. Silence on the other end of the line. When Bowen spoke again, his voice was quiet. Hurt. Is that what you think this was? A mistake. Renee closed her eyes. I don't know what to think anymore. I'll tell you what to think. Bowen's voice was raw now. Think about who brought you food when you hadn't eaten. Who listened when you talked about Sienna. Who saw you, really saw you, when everyone else just saw a judge or a victim or a symbol. He paused. That wasn't strategy, Renee. That wasn't documentation. That was me caring about another human being who'd been through hell and was still standing. Then why does it feel like I'm about to lose everything? Her voice broke on the last word. You're not going to lose anything. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. Renee shook her head even though he couldn't see it. I can't do this, Bowen. I can't fight Drexler and the conduct board and the whole damn system while wondering if the one person I thought understood me was just building a case file. That's not fair. Fair. Renee's voice turned to ice. You want to talk about fair? I got slapped in front of cameras. I presided over my assaulter's testimony with a bruise on my face. I finally, let myself trust someone. And now I'm being investigated for misconduct because of it. So don't talk to me about fair, Bowen. I was trying to help you. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't ask you to document anything or build cases or play crusader. She was shouting now, all the pain and fear and betrayal pouring out. I asked you for nothing. You offered. You came into my chambers. You made me believe. She stopped, the words choking off. Believe what? Bowen asked softly. That maybe I didn't have to be alone anymore, she whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Renee. Bowen's voice was thick with emotion. You don't have to be. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Yes, you are. Renee's voice was dull now, exhausted. We both are. Because even if we did nothing wrong, even if every word you said is true, it doesn't matter. The damage is done. And I can't have you in my life if it means losing my ability to do this job. Sienna deserves better than that. Don't use your daughter as an excuse to push me away. The words hit like a slap. Excuse me. Renee's voice was dangerously quiet. You heard me. Bowen sounded desperate now, saying things he shouldn't, unable to stop himself. You're scared. I get it. But you're using Sienna's memory as armor. As a reason to never let anyone in. As justification for staying alone forever. You don't know anything about my daughter. I know you loved her. I know you lost her. I know it destroyed you. Bowen's voice cracked. But I also know she wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself by refusing to let anyone care about you. How dare you? I dare because someone has to. Bowen shouted. Someone has to tell you that it's okay to be human. That it's okay to need people. That it's okay to let someone stand beside you instead of always standing alone. I don't need anyone, Renee said coldly. I've made it this far by myself. I'll keep going the same way. That's not strength, Renee. That's just fear. The words hung in the air between them, too true and too cruel to take back. Don't call me again, Renee said quietly. Renee, please. I mean it, Bowen. Don't call. Don't text. Don't come to my chambers. We're done. You don't mean that. I'm a judge, Mr. Licht. I say exactly what I mean. Goodbye. She ended the call and stood in her kitchen, shaking, tears streaming down her face. Her phone immediately rang again. She powered it off. Then she sank to the floor, her back against the cabinet, and let herself break in a way she hadn't allowed since the night Sienna died. Across town, Bowen sat in his apartment, staring at the phone in his hand, Renee's final words echoing in his head. We're done. He'd pushed too hard. Said too much. Crossed lines he'd known were there even as he crossed them. But God, he'd meant every word. She was scared. And she was using that fear to wall herself off from anything good that might come into her life. And he'd just lost the first real connection he'd felt in years because he'd tried to save her from a fight she didn't want him fighting. He looked at the files spread across his coffee table. Months of research on Callum Drexler. Incident reports. Witness statements. Patterns of behavior. He'd built this case because it needed to be built. Because men like Drexler shouldn't get to hide behind badges. But somewhere along the way, it had stopped being about justice and started being about her. About protecting her. About standing beside her. About proving to her, and maybe to himself, that not everyone would let her down. And now she thought he'd used her. Bowen leaned back on the couch, covered his face with his hands, and let out a long, shaking breath. He'd lost his sister to a cop who faced no consequences. Now he was losing Renee to his own desperate need to make sure that didn't happen again. The worst part. He understood exactly why she'd shut him out. Because he'd have done the same thing. The investigation moved slowly, like all bureaucratic things do. Renee provided her written response to the Judicial Conduct Board, a precise legal document that laid out the facts without emotion. Yes, she had spoken with Mr. Licht in her chambers. No, there was no romantic relationship. No, there had been no impropriety. Their conversation had been personal but appropriate. Two professionals who had shared traumatic experiences finding common ground. The bruise on her face in the courthouse photos, she noted, spoke to her state of mind that evening. Mr. Licht had shown basic human kindness. Nothing more. She didn't mention how his kindness had cracked something open inside her. How for 90 minutes, she'd felt less alone than she had in 3 years. That wasn't relevant to the investigation. 2 weeks passed. Renee went to work, presided over cases, made rulings, went home, repeated. She didn't see Bowen. He'd honored her request. No calls, no texts, no appearances in her courtroom. She heard through the courthouse grapevine that he'd requested case reassignments to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Even when he was respecting her boundaries, he was protecting her. It made her angry, and it made her ache. Thea watched her with worried eyes but said nothing. Not until the 3rd week, when she brought afternoon coffee into chambers and found Renee staring out the window at nothing. You look like hell, Thea said bluntly. Thank you for that professional assessment. I'm not being professional. I'm being your friend. Thea set the coffee down. When's the last time you ate a real meal? I eat. Cereal and coffee don't count. Thea sat down uninvited. Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. Renee. Thea's voice was gentle. You've been a ghost for 3 weeks. You're losing weight. You're not sleeping. Don't deny it. I can see the circles under your eyes. And you look at your phone like it's a snake that might bite you. Renee said nothing. This is about Bowen, isn't it? It's about the investigation. Bullshit. Thea leaned forward. The investigation is a formality. Everyone knows Drexler's complaint is retaliation. Even the board knows it. This is about you pushing away the first person who's made you feel something in years. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Thea's eyes were knowing. I saw the way you looked after he left your chambers that night. Lighter. Almost happy. And then Drexler filed that complaint and you slammed every door shut. I had to. No, you didn't. You chose to. There's a difference. Thea softened her voice. Renee, I loved Sienna like she was my own niece. I watched what losing her did to you. And I understand why you built walls. But Bowen wasn't trying to tear them down to hurt you. He was trying to stand beside you. He went behind my back. He tried to protect you. Thea's frustration broke through. Maybe he did it wrong. Maybe he should have told you about his documentation first. But his heart was in the right place, and you know it. Renee's hands were shaking. She clasped them together. I can't lose this bench, Thea. I can't. It's all I have left. It's the only way I can honor her. That's not true. Thea reached across the desk and covered Renee's hands with her own. Honoring Sienna doesn't mean martyring yourself. It doesn't mean being alone forever. It means living, really living, in a way that would make her proud. How am I supposed to do that when everything feels like quicksand? When every time I let my guard down, someone uses it against me? Not everyone is Drexler. Not everyone is the system that failed you. Thea squeezed her hands. Bowen is a good man who made a mistake. And I think you care about him more than you're willing to admit. Even to yourself. Renee closed her eyes. It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters. That night, alone in her house, Renee couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Thea's words circling her mind like birds. Honoring Sienna doesn't mean being alone forever. She thought about Sienna. About the kind of woman she would have grown up to be. Strong, yes. But also kind. Open. Willing to take risks on people. Would Sienna want her mother to spend the rest of her life locked behind walls of grief and duty? Renee sat up, turned on the lamp, and looked at the photograph on her nightstand. Sienna at 7, gap-toothed and laughing, her whole future ahead of her. What would you tell me to do, baby? She whispered. The photograph didn't answer. But in the silence, Renee heard her daughter's voice anyway. Not real, just memory, but clear as day. Mama, you gotta be brave. Something Sienna had said once, when Renee was preparing for a difficult trial. When she'd been scared and overwhelmed and ready to quit. You gotta be brave, Mama. That's what you always tell me. Renee's eyes filled with tears. Being brave didn't mean being alone. It meant being vulnerable. It meant risking pain for the chance at something real. She picked up her phone. It was nearly midnight. She opened her messages. Scrolled to Bowen's name. His last text was from 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better. She'd never responded. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard. What could she possibly say? How could she explain that she'd been wrong? That fear had made her cruel? That she'd pushed him away not because he'd hurt her, but because he'd made her feel things she thought she'd buried with her daughter? She started typing, then deleted it. Started again. Deleted again. Finally, she wrote 4 words. Can we talk? Her finger hovered over send. This was the choice. The real one. She could put the phone down. Maintain her walls. Stay safe and alone. Or she could press send. Risk rejection. Risk pain. Risk everything for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry this weight alone anymore. Renee looked at Sienna's photograph one more time. Be brave, Mama. She pressed send. Across town, Bowen was at his kitchen table, surrounded by files he could no longer look at. He'd spent 3 weeks trying to respect Renee's boundaries while also building the case against Drexler. The complaint to the police department was filed. The evidence was documented. Witnesses were prepared to testify. But it all felt hollow without her. He'd gone over their last conversation 1,000 times, hearing his own words echo back with all their sharp edges. That's not strength. That's just fear. He'd been cruel. And right. And cruel because he was right, which was the worst kind of cruel. She'd been protecting herself the only way she knew how, and he'd thrown her grief in her face like a weapon. His phone was on the table, silent. He'd stopped hoping she'd call weeks ago. Then it buzzed. He stared at it for 3 full seconds before reaching for it. A message. From Renee. Can we talk? His heart stopped. Then started again, faster. 4 words. A question. An opening. A choice. He could ignore it. Protect himself from another round of hurt. Let her come to him on her own time, if she ever did. Or he could respond. Meet her halfway. Risk everything for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to that moment in her chambers when 2 broken people had recognized each other. Bowen's fingers moved before his brain caught up. Yes. Anywhere. Anytime. He hit send and held his breath. The 3 dots appeared immediately. She was typing. Then, my house. Tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. I'll make coffee. Bowen smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. I'll bring breakfast. Real breakfast, not cereal. A pause. And, how did you know? Never mind. See you tomorrow. He set the phone down gently, like it was precious. Tomorrow. Tomorrow they would talk. Really talk. Without anger or fear or the weight of accusations between them. Tomorrow, maybe they could start again. Bowen arrived at 7:58 with a bag from the bakery on 5th Street and a knot of nerves in his chest. Renee's house was a modest colonial with good bones and a garden that had gone dormant for winter. He stood on the porch for a moment, gathering courage, then knocked. She opened the door almost immediately, like she'd been waiting. She was dressed simply. Jeans, a soft sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of the neat twists she wore to court. Without the robe and the bench and the armor of her position, she looked younger, softer, beautiful in a way that made his breath catch. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." They stood there for an awkward moment, all the words they needed to say crowding between them. Then Renee stepped back. "Come in. Coffee's ready." The house smelled like home, coffee and something warm, cinnamon maybe. She led him to the kitchen, a sunny room with worn countertops and a small table by the window. Bowen set down the bag. "I brought croissants. And those Danish things with cheese. And some kind of berry tart because I panicked and bought too much." Renee's smile was small but real. Stress baking by proxy? Something like that. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, real mugs, not paper cups, and they sat across from each other at the table. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Renee took a breath. "I owe you an apology. Renee. Please. Let me say this." She wrapped her hands around her mug like she was anchoring herself. "I was cruel. On the phone. I said things I didn't mean because I was scared and hurt, and I lashed out at the safest target." "I wasn't exactly gentle either," Bowen said quietly. "No. But you were right." Renee met his eyes. "I was using fear as armor. Using Sienna's memory as a reason to never let anyone close. You saw that, and you called me on it, and I hated you for it because the truth hurt. I shouldn't have said it that way. Maybe not. But I needed to hear it." She paused. "Thea said something to me. She said that honoring Sienna doesn't mean martyring myself. That my daughter would want me to live, not just survive." Her voice cracked slightly. "And she was right. Sienna would hate seeing me like this, locked away, afraid to feel anything, using grief as a wall. Bowen reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. You've been through hell, Renee. You're allowed to protect yourself. But I'm not supposed to punish myself. She looked down at their almost touching hands. And I'm not supposed to punish people who care about me just because I'm afraid of losing them. Is that what this is? Bowen asked softly. You care about me? Renee's laugh was watery. I wouldn't have been so angry if I didn't. You can't hurt me unless I've let you in. She finally took his hand, lacing their fingers together. And I let you in, Bowen. That night in my chambers. Maybe even before that. And it terrified me. Bowen squeezed her hand. For what it's worth, you terrified me too. You still do. In the best possible way. They sat in silence, hands clasped, the morning sun painting gold across the table. I talked to the conduct board yesterday, Renee said eventually. They're closing the investigation. Insufficient evidence of misconduct. Drexler's complaint has been dismissed. Bowen's eyes widened. Renee, that's incredible. There's more. She took a breath. The district attorney is filing charges against Drexler. Assault. Official misconduct. Apparently your documentation, all those months of building a case, gave them exactly what they needed, combined with the video of what he did to me and testimony from other victims. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. He's done, Bowen. He's actually done. Bowen sat back, overwhelmed. I didn't think they'd actually do it. I didn't think. You gave them no choice. You built something they couldn't ignore. Renee's grip on his hand tightened. You did that. Not just for me. For everyone he's hurt. For your sister. Bowen's eyes filled with tears. Maya would have liked you. I wish I could have known her. Me too. They sat with that for a moment, honoring the dead who had brought them together. Then Renee spoke again, her voice tentative. I don't know what this is. Between us. I don't know if it's friendship or something more or just two broken people recognizing each other. But I know I don't want to lose it. You won't, Bowen said firmly. Not unless you send me away again. And even then, I'd probably ignore you and bring pastries until you changed your mind. Renee laughed. A real laugh, bright and surprised. That's a terrible legal strategy. Good thing I'm a lawyer and not a strategist. He leaned forward. Renee, I'm not asking for promises or labels or anything you're not ready for. I'm just asking for a chance. To have coffee. To talk. To see where this goes without fear or pressure or ethics complaints hanging over us. What if I'm still scared? Then we'll be scared together. He smiled. Fear is less heavy when you share the weight. Renee studied him for a long moment, this man who had witnessed her humiliation and turned it into solidarity, who had seen her walls and waited patiently for her to lower them, who understood grief because he carried his own. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Okay, let's try. Coffee. Conversations. Seeing where this goes. She paused. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If I start building walls again, if I get scared and try to push you away, don't let me. Call me on it. Remind me that I chose this. That we chose this. Bowen brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. I promise. But you have to promise me something too. What? If I'm moving too fast or pushing too hard, tell me. I spent so long trying to save people I couldn't save that sometimes I forget people don't need saving. They just need someone standing beside them. I can do that, Renee said softly. They finished their coffee and ate pastries and talked about everything and nothing. Favorite books, terrible movies, the quirks of courthouse politics. Easy conversation that felt like coming home. When Bowen finally stood to leave, Renee walked him to the door. Same time next week, he asked, his hand on the doorknob. Or sooner, Renee said. If you want. I want. They stood close, the air between them charged with possibility. Bowen leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was soft, tentative, sweet, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "See you inside," Renee whispered, echoing those words she'd said on the courthouse steps. But this time they meant something different. Something about letting him see inside her walls, inside her heart. "See you inside," Bowen repeated, understanding. 3 months later, Renee stood on the bench in her courtroom, presiding over a sentencing hearing. The defendant was a young woman, barely 20, who'd been caught shoplifting formula for her infant daughter. First offense. No priors. Desperate circumstances. The prosecution recommended jail time. Renee looked at the young woman, scared, exhausted, holding her public defender's hand like a lifeline. "Ms. Torres," Renee said gently, "I've reviewed your case. I've read the letters from your employer, your church, your daughter's pediatrician. I've considered your circumstances and your choices." The courtroom was silent. "I'm sentencing you to 6 months probation, 50 hours of community service, and mandatory enrollment in the county's parenting support program." Renee paused. "I'm also connecting you with resources for emergency assistance, food, childcare, job training. You made a mistake, but you're not your worst moment. You're a mother trying to care for her child. This court sees you, and this court believes you deserve a second chance." The young woman burst into tears. "Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you." Renee brought down the gavel gently. "Don't thank me. Just do better. Be better. Your daughter is counting on you." After the hearing, Renee returned to chambers and found Bowen waiting with takeout and that smile that still made her heart skip. "How'd it go?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "I think I made a difference today," she said. "A real one. You make a difference every day." They ate lunch together, talking and laughing, and Renee marveled at how normal this had become. How natural it felt to have someone in her life again, someone who understood both her grief and her hope. On her desk, Sienna's photograph still sat in its brass frame. But next to it now was a new photo, Renee and Bowen at a community event, both smiling, his arm around her shoulders, her hand on his chest. Two people who had lost everything learning how to build something new. Together. Renee picked up Sienna's photo and whispered, "Look, baby. Mama was brave." And in the quiet of her chambers, surrounded by law books and hope and unexpected love, Renee Hale finally understood what it meant to honor the dead by choosing to live. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone in after we've been hurt. Have you ever taken that risk? Have you ever found love in the most unexpected place? Drop a comment below. Your story might inspire someone else to be brave too.